skills, and I am working on a couple of projects this morning. And one of them is to make another batch of chicken stock. And I have determined that at this point I will probably need to can up chicken stock once a week to keep up with Mark. I am ahead of him. I did a batch last fall, or sorry, at the end of spring. Just before he stopped drinking it all, I got caught up and I got probably about 20 or 30 pint jars stashed away, but he's found them, he's getting into them, so I expected that this fall. So now I'm just trying to make sure that I keep up with him and do keep some in stock at the same time. And with that, I do have other things that I have to do. I have to make more bread. I don't know if I'll get to that today. I'd like to try another batch of raisin bread. I'd also like to try a batch of polenta. I've not made any yet, and hopefully the cornmeal that I bought for it is suitable. I think that cornmeal is on the medium to fine grade, and I'm sure it'll work. It may not be the best cornmeal for polenta, but certainly we can make cornbread with it, and that's fine. I'm sure we can find other uses for it as well. And I'm glad to have some stock, and I may search around for some whole corn for a larger batch to keep in stock. Anyway, let's get to it. So here we are, and we'll let this cook down for about an hour and then try to pull the meat off. And by the way, I know that not everyone can find chicken carcasses, but this is what I use. Certainly turkey carcasses, you can do the same thing. And Mark is getting way ahead of me on the stock consumption, so I do have plenty of jars now to be able to do one batch. And okay, just an interesting side note here on my apple vinegar that I was making from the scraps rather than throwing them out. As you can see, I have 4 different jars, and there does seem to be quite the variation between one and the other. Now this one here I just strained. This was the first batch that I made, and it's in the 1 gallon large jug, and it has netted me a half gallon of vinegar, and it looks really clean, but when I transferred it over from the large jar to this one, I lost the mother, so that's why it looks so clean, but it will continue to develop mother as it ages. Now, interestingly enough, this one here has developed a whole lot of mother, and a lot of it has sunk to the bottom. Some of it has stayed at the top. This one here, not so much, but the color is much richer. And I don't know what makes the difference. If it's the age of the apples, the type of apples. I know I've used 2 different types of apples, but there does seem to be quite a color variation. Now, the one thing I'm going to suggest is that after I have strained them, and I've decided not to mix them in one jar, although I could probably do that without issue, but I want to keep them separated to see how they develop, to see how the flavor develops, and make sure everything's okay. And if there's one that, like say if this one is not really a good batch, I really don't want to mix it with others that are. So I have no idea why that one is. Either it was just not filtered as well as the rest of them, and that could very well be the case, and it could be just fine, but it does seem to have a lot of sediment at the bottom. That isn't worrying me at this point. I just decided that I really don't want to mix them into one, but at this point, okay, they've been strained, and they need to age. So the one thing that you have to make sure you do is to put a plastic lid, not a metal lid, on these jars, because vinegar is corrosive and the metal lids will deteriorate. If you don't have Of course, the other option is to do something like put a piece of parchment paper. So what you're doing is you're actually separating the vinegar from the metal. And then you could actually put both a lid and a ring on that, and that's just as secure and just as safe. And you won't spill it. But I do have I do have the plastic lids, so I prefer to use them anyway where I can. Plastic lids are not vacuum sealed type items. They do not stop air. So don't expect these to be air sealed, but they are actually ideal for this environment, so I prefer to use the plastic lids where I can. So now we just let these age, and the longer they age, the stronger your apple vinegar will taste. And if you leave it long enough, yes, it will taste like the store-bought apple vinegar. Sometimes mine, we've used them before they've aged too much, and they were just a little bit too much on the mild side. But either way, it still tastes very good. But minimum, I would let these age a month, and 6 months to a year will not hurt it at all. Okay, that's just a little side note. Thought you'd find a little bit of interest in this. And yeah, apple vinegar from garbage. Okay, back to my chicken stock. And it would appear as though, oh yes, it's all falling apart. So what I want to do is take this out of the pot, and I'm going to take as much of the meat off this, if I can get out of the pot before it all falls apart. I think I've got to get something else to strain this. Okay, so I have pulled all the chicken out of the pot of water that I've had it boiling in, and I'm going to prepare some onions, some celery, and some carrots to throw in there. And when this cools, and not before, I will pick off any good pieces of meat and put it in this bowl, and we'll see what we end up with. And that will be put into probably a pint jar, along with some finished chicken stock, and be used for, definitely should be able to make soup, later on. Just pull out one of these pint jars with this chicken meat in it, and add vegetables, add noodles, and it would be a very hearty chicken soup. Okay, that is the process for now, so for the time being. Okay, perfect opportunity to use some of your dehydrated vegetables. So if you have dehydrated carrots, certainly take a small handful of that, and it can be added to your chicken stock. I have some dehydrated onions as well. Now I don't have any dehydrated celery just yet. I have probably got to catch up on that one. But I'm also going to put a whole fresh onion, and I'm just going to cut the end off and cut this into quarters, and I'm going to put it in peel and all. And if you're not aware, it's that just a little bit of peel from one onion will give your stock a lovely color. Okay, so, okay. And as for your celery, I have fresh celery stock here, and let me just bring this down. Now, I don't really want to use the fresh stock. What I want to use is the ends here. So actually, I'm just going to cut the end off just like that, and I'm going to just wrap that up again and wash this. That's all I have to do is wash these, because the bottom is where you get a lot of the dirt. And We don't want the dirt, we just want the celery flavor. And I can certainly cut the end off here. So, wash these well. And here the inside is clean, so that's going to be fine. So, once this is washed, I will put that in my bowl here and put this all in my chicken stock. A little bit of salt if you want to add it. I don't bother because Mark likes to add the salt as he uses it. Okay, I have washed everything and I'm going to just drop all of these into my chicken stock that is boiling there, well, simmering. And you just want to simmer this slowly. I'm going to add a little bit more water, and as I said, when I pick the meat off those bones, the bones will go back in there. Now, when we are done with this chicken stock, all of that will be strained out. So, it is more for flavor than anything else. Okay. Okay, well here I am. I've got one bowl with my bones and another one with the meat. So I'm going to put all this meat into a pint jar. And when my stock is done, I will fill up this jar with stock. Now, when you go to make soup, you certainly can use another pint jar of chicken stock to supplement this one, because in this one there may not be enough liquid. I'm just going to put enough in here so that this jar can be processed. And as you can see, there's plenty of meat in there. Now, is this extreme? It can be considered so. I'm just learning how not to waste anything as much as I can. Just like I made the vinegar with scraps of apple that would have been thrown out. We can make a hearty chicken soup meal from scraps that I have thrown out in the past. So now these bones are going to go back into the stock to further add flavor to the chicken stock. Okay, the bones have gone back into the chicken stock. And I'm going to let this simmer for hours at this point. So let all the goodness come out of the carrots and the celery and the onion and the balance of the chicken bones that I've put in there. So just leave this on and let it simmer very gently for a couple of hours. And then we'll get back and we'll can it. And meanwhile, I'm just going to put this one jar of chicken in the refrigerator until I'm ready to can it, and then we will obviously use the chicken stock, fill this up and can it up. I think today's video is more based on what you can do with very little, and I'm not necessarily a fan of scrimping to that degree, but I don't see any harm in it, and it might be of some value down the road. And what I mean to that degree is by making food out of things that you normally would have thrown in the garbage. I am changing my attitude towards that a fair bit, and I like to see no waste where I can help it. So doing the best I can to learn how to adapt, and I always was a saver and a scrimper, but not to this degree, but always new skills to learn. Okay.